Hello again. Jeff Minier with Shiloh Baptist. Moving along from our last devotional together, the greatest command is to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second, to love your neighbor as yourself. I want us to walk into the parable of the Good Samaritan. Luke chapter 10, starting verse 25 through 37. On one occasion, an expert of the law stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he asked, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" "What is written in the law?" he replied. "How do you read it?" The expert in the law answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." "You have answered correctly," Jesus replied. "Do this, and you will live." But he wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" Let's just think about a couple of things in that first opening part. There were many people who were in conflict with Jesus in his day. When you've got someone who has great influence, it is perfectly fine to listen carefully to what they're doing and see if what they're doing matches with what seems good and right. You need to be discerning at all times, no matter who it is you're listening to. This particular guy was an expert in the law. In our King James translation, it would be called a scribe and the Pharisees. In my New International Version, it's called teacher of the law or expert in the law and the Pharisees. The expert in the law was someone who their job as a community was to say, this is proper understanding of the Bible. This is proper theology. The Pharisees in Jesus' day were the practical Bible teachers on the street level. And the Pharisees' idea was our job is to be in charge of how it is practically lived out in obedience to what the experts in the law said was proper understanding and theology. So you've got one of the top line thinkers of the day questioning this extremely influential man, Jesus, a teacher on the street level. "What must I do?" Jesus responds, "Well, what is written? How do you read it?" He gave the right answer. Love the Lord, love your neighbor. You've answered correctly. Do this and you will live. Jesus is not endorsing a good work salvation, that you could get to heaven by obeying these commands. Rather, it is in obeying the commands of Scripture that you and I will run right up against just how selfish and sinful we are. And we will see how far we cannot love God with all our heart, and we cannot love our neighbor as ourselves unless God is doing something in us to totally change us so that we can love him better and better, and then we could love our neighbor with the love God has first given us. Do this and you will live. But he wanted to justify himself. Luke 10:29. And that shows the true heart of every fallen human being. He wanted to justify himself. We get so comfortable in our frame of reference, in our home, in our job, with our friends, in our group of people, whether it would be my political party or my church denomination or my race, my group of people I was educated with, my people, socioeconomic status I work with. We all end up in a group and we all carve out some comfort zone, and we love to stay there. We love to just burrow in and seek to justify myself, because entering into your pain, entering into anybody else's struggle means I have to climb out of my safe little burrow I've tried to carve for myself and enter into your pain, enter into meet your need see if there's a way I can invest in, and that costs me. I don't like that. But he wanted to justify himself, and so he asked, who is my neighbor? I know what God wants, but if I can excuse my disobedience, then I just deceive myself that I'm okay and I go on about my business. In reply, Jesus said, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho. Simple enough, he's on a journey. In context, he is speaking to Jewish people, so we can all assume this is a Jewish man. To understand context, if you don't already know it well, as soon as he brings in the Samaritan, he brings up the one people group the Jews were the most prejudiced against in all the world. The Jews would separate themselves as the people who served the one true and living God. They would separate themselves from all those who worshiped many gods, false gods, all of that. But they had a particular attitude issue towards the country right next to them that had been a mixed people, partly Jew, partly pagans brought in by another country, and the religions mixed, the cultures mixed, and it was a mixed people. That is where the Jewish people had the most prejudice against the Samaritans. So this man is going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he fell into the hands of robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. A major driving influence for the leaders of worship in Jesus' day was the idea that I must stay ritually, religiously clean. I must stay clean. And anything that would have to do with blood or body fluids would make me unclean. And so if the priest is on his way to Jerusalem, he's on his way to serve in the temple. If he becomes defiled, unclean, he misses his total opportunity to serve God. And he immediately decides, being seen as serving God in my pomp, in my robes, in my status, in my position, is far more important than serving God in a practical need right now, which will keep me from being able to serve God in the way I want to serve God. So he sees the man in need. It's one of his own people, and he hits the other side of the street on the other sidewalk and walks right by him. So too, a Levite, when he came to the place, saw him, passed by on the other side. Both of these are religious leaders of the day. The priest was supposed to be the one who took the hand of the sinner and the hand of God and brought the two together. But he can't be bothered with the possibility of not being able to serve publicly and to be seen as a priest, to be defiled for a short period of time, a couple of weeks. And in their day, we don't tend to realize or think about it, but they had absolutely no division of church and state in Jesus' day. It was members of the priestly, especially the high priest family, who run the government. The Pharisees and the Sadducees, of which the priestly families were, they were the opposing political parties. And so you've got the political leader, religious leader, both in the same person, refusing to meet the needs of the man on the street. The lower level Bible teacher, the Levite, he sees the need, crosses the street, goes on. Luke 10:33, but a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, took pity on him. The Samaritans often knew of the prejudice, anger, hatred the Jews showed them, and as happens regularly, they reflected it. So Jesus, trying to do a serious wake-up call as he tells the story, says the two people who serve God directly bypass the man in need, but the one everybody hates and despises just because. As he traveled, he came to where the man was, and when he saw him, took pity on him, went to him, bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. And then he put the man on his own donkey and took him to an inn and took care of him. The next day, he took out 2 silver coins, gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have. So Jesus then turns to the expert in the law. Which of these 3 men do you think was neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robber? The expert in the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. In the language of the Bible, Hebrew Old Testament, Greek New Testament, there is a wonderful overlap in the use of the word mercy and the use of the word love, such that mercy is a practical application of love in a time of need. Which of these 3 men was a neighbor, acted neighborly to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? The one who had mercy. Jesus told him, go and do likewise. In a day when many in our nation are grieving over the unconscionable murders, deaths, killings of what's going on, our hearts ache. And as we think about, okay, God, you ask me to love you with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love my neighbor as myself. And my heart aches for those who are hurting right now. I'm praying for them and praying for some stability in our country, some sanity in our country, a dismantling of any structural and all structural racism going on in our country. Lord, how can I be a neighbor? In the text, simple and straightforward, Jesus didn't happen to mention things which could be good. Going to a totally different town and stepping right into different projects and ministry to meet needs. Jesus first and foremost said, when you want to be a neighbor, what needs has God put in front of your life? Who is your physical neighbor? Who's in your neighborhood? What's going on at your local school? What's going on in your town? Who has God dropped in front of you that you see has a need? Oh, but that might put me at risk. That is exactly what the priest and the Levite saw. They could be put at risk if they help this man who's injured. Something because of the safety of our country. Few of us, when we see someone hurt, think that, wow, if I stop to help this person, there may be others lurking in the shadows who will jump out and then attack me and hurt me merely because I stopped to help. And in this situation, the Samaritan man was more concerned on showing mercy than on continuing to protect himself. If you see a need and you think the need could put you in serious danger, then see about who you can bring along with you to meet the need so that there is some reasonable safety of what's going on. But for my own heart, I find I am gloriously selfish and human, that I want to be like this expert in the law and say, well, I don't know anybody who's actually hurting and in need in the situation. And so as one rather punchy book and author put it, I have a metaphorical love for a metaphorical neighbor, and so I'm doing absolutely nothing for nobody, but I feel good about myself. I want to encourage you to seek God as I'm attempting to do. Lord, what needs have you put in my life that I can step up and help and show mercy and love and encouragement and support? Romans 12:15. Rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep. Where can we step in and encourage and support? Where can we give literal physical health. And that one crosses over the fact that we live in a pandemic time. We have people, contacts, who this pandemic destroyed their jobs, took away their income, and in some situations, they weren't working at the time of the pandemic. They can't ask for unemployment. Who has God put into our lives that we might show the love of God so that we are truly practicing a love of God and a love of our neighbor? I invite you to join with me in prayer. God, what needs are out there that I could meet to show the love of Christ? Thank you for joining me today.